we were actually looked upon as second-class citizens back in the 50s and 60s. And, you know, you had a lot of hard feelings over it. You know, people that you thought were your friends, you know, turned out that they actually looked down on you because they thought you were some kind of a gangster or something because you were a poker player. And then when Benny Binion started the World Series of Poker and it started getting televised, well, then it started getting, you know, more accepted and everything, and these little lipstick cameras, they call them, where you can see the players' hole cards as they play. It just caught on. People are beginning to find out what I've known for 50 years, that poker is just a great game. And so I think that's kind of what it's attributed to. It's, you know, getting more and more national exposure on, besides the television, on magazines, newspapers, and the internet, you know, and it's just a phenomenon. Well, we had a kind of what we called a Texas circuit back in those days. There were games in almost every town around Texas, and we kind of had an idea of where they were going to be playing each day of the week, and we would just go from town to town and to play in the games when they were playing. There always were a bunch of local people that wanted to play, and we sort of had a nucleus of pros that traveled from town to town to play with these guys. And they were, you know, everybody was well liked, and everybody was pretty well mannered, and so we were well accepted wherever we went. We always had to face a lot of dangers, you know, back in those days about not only you might get arrested, you might get robbed, you might get cheated, you might have trouble collecting the money after you won it. So it was quite a challenge, quite a bit different than today, that these players, you know, they just take for granted these things, that you can go into a protected environment like the casinos, you know, and where you don't have to worry about any of those things. But we had, you know, I was on the bad end of robberies, I think 5 different times in my life. And I remember one of them specifically was down in Austin, Texas. We were playing out in a farmhouse, and the windows started breaking all over the house, and 7 guys in ski masks came up with shotguns. So they lined us up against the wall, you know, and they took our money and everything. And they always pick on the biggest guy there, which was usually me. It seems like that's some kind of rule of thumb to show how tough they are or something. So this little guy, about 5'2", turned me around, you know, and he said, "Who runs this poker game?" Well, I wasn't going to tell. So I told him, "I don't know." And the guy hit me in the stomach with the barrel of his gun. He said, "I said, who runs this poker game?" And again, I said, "I don't know." And he took the butt end of the shotgun and hit me upside the head with it. And he said, "Who runs this poker game?" I said, "I told you I don't know." So he had one of those old-fashioned shotguns where you cock the hammers, and he cocked both of the hammers on his double-barrel shotgun. He set it right here between my eyes. He said, "I said, who runs this poker game?" And I told him, "That guy right down there in the green shirt." So, you know, discretion was the better part of being the valor that day. But it was, you know, everybody laughed about it for years. Okay, I've had so many bad beats, it's really hard to pick some out, but one that sticks in my mind is the year, I think it was 1982, I think, or 81. It was the first year that Stu Ungar won the World Series of Poker. It came down to the last 2. It was Stu and myself. And I remember the flop came ace, 7, deuce, and I had aces and 7s, and he had a tray 4. And the 4th card was a 5, and made him a bicycle, 5 high straight. And so that one always stuck in my mind because it would have been my 3rd world championship, and it was his 1st, and he went on to win 3. So I think that's the one that sticks in my mind the most. I can recall against Crandall Addington one time, the current turn came a king, deuce deuce, and I had two pocket kings, and Crandall had two pocket sevens, and the fourth card was a seven, and the fifth card was a seven for a big pot. So I remember that one pretty vividly too. One of the bad beats that I have put on some players over the year, probably the most significant one, was the year that I won my first World Series of Poker championship. We got involved in a pot. I had a 10 deuce of spades, and Jesse Alto had ace jack of hearts, and the flop was a ace jack 10. And he made some kind of a small bet, and I'd just beaten Jesse a pot, and I knew he was kind of on tilt. So I called him, hoping to catch a 10 or a deuce where I might break him with this hand. And sure enough, I caught a deuce. But Jesse already had aces and jacks, and he bet it, and I moved in on him all of his money. And he called it, and I caught a 10 on the river and made a 10s full, which was a pretty brutal beat to put on, a player like Jesse Alto's caliber. And the other two that I remember very well, bad beats that I put on people, was against the same guy, was Bobby Baldwin. I can only remember making two royal flushes in big games in my life, and I made them both on him. I remember at the Golden Nugget back in the 70s somewhere, no, perhaps the 80s, the turn came a king, jack of spades, and another jack of hearts, I think. And Bobby turned four jacks, and I had an open-end straight flush, I think the queen 10 of spades. And Bobby made a small bet, and I raised him. Of course, he just called me because he had four jacks. And then I caught the ace of spades to make a royal flush, and I remember it was a huge pot for the time. It was $100 and something thousand a piece that we went in there. And then another time at the Bicycle Club, later in the 80s, the Bicycle Club's in California. We were there for a tournament, and we were playing, and again, Bobby made aces full, and I made a royal flush. And to Bobby's credit, he threw that hand away at some point during this hand. I always told him I had kings full. I never showed him the hand. Of course, he made a terrific laydown with aces full, and but I had a royal flush, but he threw his hand away, which I've never admitted to him that I really had the royal flush, but I did. I remember that there was a guy named Pasquale from Houston, Texas, that was very outspoken and very talk loud, and everybody liked him. But in other words, he was just kind of a blowhard. And there was also a guy from Texas named Bully Johnson, who was very quiet and didn't say much. And so a pot came up, and this Pasquale had two aces, and he raised the pot, and Bully raised him. And Pasquale just called it instead of raising back, because he had a cinch at that point. He was trying to trap Bully, so he just called it. And the flop came an ace, deuce, four. And Pasquale checked, and Bully moved in on him, and Pasquale called it. And he stood up, got on his chair, beat his chest like he was Tarzan, and screaming, I'm the greatest, I'm the greatest. And Bully just sat there, didn't say a word. And so he carried on there before the dealer dealt the last two cards, came, I think, a king and a 9. And Bully turned over a tray 5 out of the hole. He had a straight and beat Pasquale's 3 aces. And, it was just so comical to see the look on Pasquale's face. And it was a story that was told for a long time down on the Texas circuit about that hand. So it was very funny. I was sitting right by Pasquale.